Adamantium Shadow Poo!
Hello, Pack members and Star Gods. This is a special, exclusive piece of video that Matt has decided that we are going to do. Matt, you said maybe every quarter or so we're going to do something completely exclusive to Pack members and Star Gods, something cool that we think everyone would enjoy.
Yes, and this is going to be audio too, because we know a lot of people just don't want audio.
Yes, that's true. So yeah, Matt, your idea was we had talked about, both you and I are fans of Skywald, and we talked about it a lot. And you had said, "Hey, there are these there's a story that kind of has like 5 or 6 chapters about the Shoggoths. Is that how we're pronouncing it? Shoggoth?
I've been saying Shoggoths. I never heard it said out loud until just now, so I've never even thought about it.
Yeah, I know, right?
I said Shoggoths. I don't know how
Let's say Shoggoth then.
Okay.
You're normally right on these things, so I'm going to say Shoggoth.
But I think I think what you're mentally queuing to is I've seen it spelled by other writers and stuff as Shoggoth. So I think you're referring to like variations on it in the mythos that other writers have picked up on.
This one.
Shoggoth. Let's just go with Shoggoth.
Shoggoth sounds good with this. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the Shoggoth is a creature from the, lore of H.P. Lovecraft. And both of us are big fans. You're a super fan.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I had not read any of this stuff. I was familiar with Skywald. I had read a bunch here and there, and but I'd never read any of this. What made you pick this? How did this come on your radar?
So several years back, like around 2018, I followed some guy named George Warner on Facebook. Who was a super fan of Skywald output. And I think he might have even contributed a story or two in the end days or something. But he had like released a comp of this werewolf story that was really dark and weird. And he was working on collecting all the human gargoyle stuff that Al Hewetson wrote, which is probably the most famous serialized story in the Skywald material. Yeah. And when I was picking stuff for you and I to talk about on the bonus show, like backup stuff or extra stuff or just fun things, I really wanted to do a Skywald thing. And I was like, well, let's do a review of a story. And so I looked up the ones and, Human Gargoyles was the one that jumped immediately. But I was like, let's go a little deeper, a little weirder. And then it just coincided that Halloween was coming up. So I was like, let's do like a straight up, weird monster thing. So I chose this one. And I've always been interested in Skywald. I've made my own digital omnibus editions from them because they're all public domain. They were all accidentally published into the public domain from the get-go. So, So this one sounded, it's Lovecraft based. I love Lovecraft. It's Skywald. It's got Spanish artists. It just seemed like a real sweet spot for us and a good Halloween offering.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I say, I'd never read this stuff, but I read it and I was delighted by it. And so, yeah, I just figured we'd start off talking a little bit about Skywald. I had kind of known about Skywald, but once, a friend of mine, I did research for a friend of mine named John McClure, and we had an article published in the CGC that was, it was all about Israel Waldman. So Skywald, if you don't know, you probably already know if you're listeners of us, but it was founded in 1970 by Saul Brodsky, Sky, and Israel Waldman, Wald. And Brodsky and Waldman had worked before a little bit. Just a real quick thing about Israel Waldman, because I can go on and on and on. But Israel Waldman is a fascinating character. He's like a con man, comics reprinting pirate publisher. It's funny that you say, I didn't even put this together, but it's funny that you say somehow it came into public domain. That's not shocking to me, because Israel Waldman has always had nothing but contempt for copyrights in general.
Yeah.
It's like he just doesn't even recognize that they exist, even when they benefit him. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. So the other two big players at Skywald are a writer tonight, which is Archaic Al Hewetson, who is a wonderful Scotsman who has written, I don't know, I think reading some articles and reading a little bio that he's done himself, he wrote over 500 stories for Skywald. He has multiple pen names. Some of them even have fan mail. I think one of the ones, maybe, what is it? The fourth story, I think, is one of his pen names. It's like Harry something.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, Harry Anderson. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, that pen name actually got its own fan mail.
Howie Anderson,
So,
yeah.
Howie Anderson, yeah. Oh man, it's great. And so yeah, and you're talking about the Spanish artists, so we're going to have all Spanish artists for this run. And so basically, Al Hewetson was brought on as a writer by Saul Brodsky. He worked for a little bit. He was starting to do really cool stuff. Brodsky left Skywald to go back to Marvel. He was offered a job for the international publishing and handling all the syndication for the rest of the world. So it was a pretty big job. And I have theories that, Marvel and even Martin Goodman, even though he had left Marvel, but he was still part of the magazine management thing, really wanted to tank Skywald for a lot of reasons. And so I feel like the first one was luring Brodsky back to Marvel.
Can I pile on? So I just told you today that I bought that Comic Book Artist Volume 2, number 5, that had a big thing about Al, about Skywald. Okay, so at the end there, I think what you were alluding to, like just to put an end on that, the second nail in the coffin of Skywald was all of the Curtis magazine books. That was Stan saying like finish him, like kind of thing.
Yeah, it was basically because Skywald was doing okay in America. From what I've read, I actually ended up being able to read that Horror Mood book that now costs like $200.
I want that so bad.
I know, when we were doing our research for the Israel Waldman piece. And so basically, that's Stan and their public and their distributor that did that. And so basically what they did is they hindered Skywald from being distributed in a lot of the bigger places, and the places where they were distributed, it's almost like Stan flooded the market with Curtis magazines directly to destroy Skywald, which I think in the end came this acrimony. I think in the end came straight from Martin Goodman, and Stan just kind of finished it. But Martin Goodman didn't leave like magazine management until like 72. I think is that when, and then 74 is Atlas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe it is actually right up until 74, but I really feel that Goodman's behind a lot of these moves because him and Waldman go way back with beef. They were con men together. Waldman bought full cover, seconds of Atlas era stuff that was supposed to go to the paper recycler. He took it and sold it to this guy they were only supposed to be used. It was just like, oh, they're only supposed to be used for promotional material, but they weren't. Well, Waldman was basically taking it, selling it. We think this was a scam that him and Goodman had done together. So they're splitting the profits off of these Atlas era, like full cover returns that are supposed to be just like, oh, it's a promotion for Florsheim and stuff like that. But that it wasn't. There was a big court case that came out. That's also in the article that we'll have probably in the show notes. Cause I really think, it's a little dry, the article. I didn't write it, but I researched it. And, but there's really, really fascinating stuff in there. The court case, especially. So anyhow, where were we going with this?
Well,
history of,
like you were saying with like Waldman and like being the kind of cheap shyster type of like publisher, which we love. I love the drama and the behind the scenes kind of, fly by night kind of rookery of the whole thing. But so when these launched, he was just jumping on Warren's coattails. So Creepy and Eerie, he's saying they're making money selling these things with magazines with no censorship. So he wanted to do that. And then he was immediately, the first few issues, which it sounds like Al Hewetson was saying, kind of crippled them rep-wise for the whole run.
Because they're not good.
where the first handful of issues were just reprints of Atlas era stuff and like Golden Age things and just kind of cobbled together a couple cheapy things they paid somebody to write and draw themselves, like just crap. They were crap. And so they hit the market, and then the horror community and the comics community, they were like, this is just shitty second, third rate stuff. And so by the time Al came on and started writing, and then when he actually took over and ran the entire show, he turned it around and had world-class Spanish artists, but it was too late for a lot of people.
It was too late for a lot of people, but yeah, I mean, the first year or so of Skywald's existence was kind of crap, and that is what Waldman and his son Herschel, who was supposed to take over the empire from Israel, that was what he did. I mean, he would go to printers after Wortham and after the Big Purge, and all these little printers, all these little comic companies went under. They wouldn't pay their bill to the printer. The printer would hold all the art, all the plates, and they would either throw them away, or Waldman would come in and be like, I'll give you $100 for everything. And he'd take everything.
Like free money, right?
They're just like, fuck it. Yeah, cool. And so then he'd press all this stuff from all these different companies, I mean, Fox, Quality, Timely, like all this stuff. And he would have Ross Andrew, for the most part, draw new covers. And he would just repackage them and sell them as IW Super Comics. And he was, the amount of cons that Waldman was into is amazing. Like, he's a really, really fascinating guy that there has still been no major article about in any comics history magazine, which I do not understand why.
Yeah.
But you're right. So Al turned it around. Al came in, he started the horror mood thing. I think it is in Nightmare. Is it in Nightmare 9 when it's the first one that he takes over? Maybe it's the one right after that where he takes over. He's full editor, and that's the first time they use the words horror mood in the description. Yeah, the mission statement's in there too. So yeah, Al turns it around, and it becomes something really good. It sold really well internationally, but it was, like you say, crippled because of its bad reputation. But man, Warren hated Skywald.
Yes, he did.
Hated Skywald more than anyone.
He found out any of his artists went and worked over there, they'd catch hell for it.
Yeah, they would. But here's the amazing thing, and this is what Herschel did actually right before Al came on, is that Herschel made a deal with the Spanish studio called Selecciones Ilustradas. Yes. And so Selecciones Ilustradas, it was an agency that contacted like Spanish comic artists all over the world. It was founded by a guy named Josep Tutain, who was basically the Kirby of Spanish comics. He was more than that. He was Kirby and Lee together of Spanish comics. And he was the greatest artist, the greatest writer, and he ended up being the greatest, hype man for all of Spanish artists. He made them go all around the world and sold their stuff. And he was really, really cool. I like, did you read what his nickname was?
No.
His nickname was the Sheriff of Comics.
That's awesome.
So yeah, he did more to influence and champion Spanish artists than anyone ever has. And he was amazing. And so Herschel made a deal with him that Skywald would have exclusive artists. Like all their artists would come from Selecciones. And so it's all these exclusive Spanish artists that came over. So it's a lot of really cool artists that, some of them were bigger than others, but a lot of them, this was their big stuff. And they were excited. This was in America, this was a bigger gig. Did they get paid more? Probably not. If Israel Waldman's behind this decision, he is as cheap as they come. And so, yeah, who knows? But the amazing Spanish artist that we got from this as well was incredible. Now, Pablo Marcos is probably the biggest name to come out of Skywald, even though he had done, he did a little bit of work for Warren, but then came right over to Skywald. Pablo Marcos is Peruvian, but Pablo became, I think it's halfway through this run, he becomes like the art director in the credits in Skywald. And so, Pablo did amazing things. Brodsky saw what amazing things he was done and brought him over to Marvel. And for the Curtis magazines, he did Tales of the Zombie, which I think is some of the greatest things ever made.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really fascinating story. And Skywald in general is just is really, really fascinating.
So it's interesting. I was enjoying that article. I can't recommend that Comic Book Artist, Volume 2, Number 5 enough, folks. If any of this stuff interests you, it's an amazing write-up, multiple articles. But thought it was particularly interesting that, like, you know, Hewetson was frustrated that, I mean, he was running the entire show. Like, once, you know, it was he was the editor. He was writing most of the stories under pseudonyms, like you said. He was handling the art, taking it, dropping off to the printers, like driving down to New York from like Toronto, I think is where he lived.
He was doing the shipping. He was shipping the issues.
Shipping. Like, I mean, it was crazy. So this was a one-man show. And it's funny because, like, you know, this had a rep for being, because of some of the kind of more lurid covers, a little less classy covers than Warren stuff. And the first year or so of just being a lot of reprints and a lot of under quality work, that, you know, they had kind of a cheaper budget. So that's why they went with the Spanish artists like that. And so I feel like it was kind of written off up until, it feels like around when that book was published. You're talking about that's like $200 now. Or like around when Hewetson died, like I think 2004, 2006.
2004 was when it really started to get a reappraisal.
Yeah. And I feel like it really turned around. People started looking at it and saying, holy shit, like, this wasn't eerie publications. This wasn't trash. This wasn't tracing golden age stuff and adding tits and blood and gore. This was like art. And why did nobody appreciate it at the time, right? So it's had this huge reappraisal in the last 20 years. Thank God. And so it's easily found online because it's public domain. If you want print copies, Guandanaland or whatever that company is called prints those. I've never looked at them because I'm not going to pay money for someone to print something that's free. Just to have it. So, Anyway, as far as Al goes, I mean, he's a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I think it's probably his biggest influence as a writer. And Lovecraft was a close second. And so I think he jumped at the chance to take some Lovecraft, you know, I mean, I never want to assume anybody knows anything, but I don't want to belabor H.P. Lovecraft. But Howard Phillips Lovecraft was a huge writer in weird fiction genre of the first quarter of the 20th century. He wrote a lot of stories for Weird Tales and had a ton of followers of people that aped him. And he's influenced Stephen King and everybody who's picked up a pen and written a horror story or drawn a horror comic, probably. Tons of films have been based on his stuff. He was a very strange man. He was a shut-in. He was a racist. He was a white supremacist. He was scared of everything. And probably, you know, a lot of people say that xenophobia, that fear, is what made his writing so pungent and so powerful. His philosophy is something just generally called like cosmic horror, which is this kind of idea that we are ultimately insignificant in the cosmos and we don't matter, and there are things out there that are that you know make us seem like ants or insignificant or whatever. And so that's where you get the idea of like the elder gods and the these things that would step on you as soon as look at you, and these a theme that we're going to see a lot in these stories tonight, that Earth, we are not the first things on Earth. Things were here long before us that ruled this place, did things here, and then left for one reason or another, and are waiting to come back or rise or whatever you want to say and rule again. So it's kind of this simmering fear in the background of a lot of Lovecraft stuff. This imminent return of something unspeakably evil and big.
Yeah, and it runs through all of this. It's so cool. I mean, you're right. It touches on all of Lovecraft's great stuff, especially at the Mountains of Madness in this one, which is great, which is my favorite anyway. So I was pleased to read all of this.
Yeah, so that was a good long preamble. So should we dive into the first chunk of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So first one is Nightmare Number 9 from October of 1972. It's a story called The Skull Forest of Old Earth. It's by Al Hewetson and Cesar, who is the pen name of Cesar Alvarez Cañete. He was born in Spain in 1938. He drew a ton of Spanish, Italian, and British comics in the 60s and 70s. This comic is his first American credit, which I can say for all three artists we're going to deal with tonight. They did lots of cool international stuff, but this is all like pretty much their first American credits.
I enjoyed, even if you don't read the stories and you don't care about reading the text of these stories, you can just pore over the art of these, in my opinion. So, I mean, so there's a link in this, in the notes for this. So if you didn't get a chance to look at this yet, download the PDF from my Google Drive. It's, again, you're not breaking the law. You're not doing anything wrong. Check it out. Also, you might be watching the video version. We're going to drop some art in here and there, but This is more about just us kind of reviewing this as a whole rather than like poring over each page or panel. So yeah, this first chapter, Jacob, this kind of blew my mind a little bit. I wasn't sure what to expect. I was expecting more of like what the second half of the story is, just based on comments I read over the years about the saga of the Shoggoths. So to start with this table setting of this, like this is about pre-human Earth, very ancient. These Uranians come here and they raise a standing stone up and they start kind of settling into what is going to become the Black Forest of Germany. But it's right now it's like this clean Earth. They've monitored it for a year for life, and it seems to be an uninhabited planet they can come to. So they come and colonize it. They all appear to be like models. They're all light-skinned, beautiful people that have names like Reese or Reed and Rosalie
Jim.
and Celia and Jim.
Which was the funniest. The best. It's like Reed. It's like, hey, Jim, Celia. Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Jim is
God.
the funniest because
Jim
James
is the
comes
funniest.
from, like like Jewish, like ancient Jewish name. It's imbued with all this meaning, and then it gets shortened to Jim, and there's just like, the Uranians got there too. They
did. Oh my God. Yeah, I know. I loved it. So the art at first thought, like the art of Cesar is a little scratchy. It's a little more primitive than some of the other artists that we're going to deal with in this saga. And but I still loved it. But you're right, they're all like models, they're all beautiful and look very white and have very interestingly normal names. And yeah, it was hilarious. But yeah, you're right. They came to Earth because they monitored it, and they were just like, it's so fertile, untouched. So they're very excited about that until one of them realizes that they might not be alone.
Yeah, and so the art for B reminded me of. Did you ever look at that new English library thing I put together? It was called Dracula, and it was a Spanish comic anthology that had nothing to do with Dracula at all, but had serialized stories and different Spanish artists, and it was translated into English and sold in England. And I made a PDF and like kind of shared it out with the Discord server, and I put it, I think, maybe on Patreon. But they had like a barbarian story that Esteban Maroto did. But this art reminded me a lot of Esteban Maroto's art in Wolf the Barbarian. So yeah, I really dug the clean line work that he has, and just the solid blacks. Like you were saying, there's kind of a scratchy scratchiness to it, but very clean. Like the negative space, white versus black, is very pronounced and balanced. Gorgeous art. Yeah, so they're out wearing their loincloths and just having their wonderful utopian existence. Like, I'm not going back, Jim. Always reminds me of that Star Trek episode. But then someone finds a crude implement, a tool, like a hammer or an axe made out of wood and rock.
Yeah, a woman goes missing, and they go and find her, and they find that she has basically been eaten. Rosalie has been eaten. And eaten alive, they say, and then they go off to search for whoever did it. Some kind of monster they think did this.
I love this immediate dark turn into like gore. Like the husband, the beautiful fashion model, they look like Lance Rock from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. They're all just
do.
Like, and he's like hugging his wife's skeleton. Her hairs, like they left the scalp, but that's all they left on her beautiful body. And they're saying she was eaten alive. So like, there's like viscera on the bones as he's hugging her and holding her. Like it just immediately gets comical and gross and kind of disturbing at the same time. So yeah, they're going to look for this person, and then they're looking around and they find. So Jacob, I was really confused by one part of the story when they're looking around. And there's a panel that has 3 hands reaching out in silhouette from the left, and in the right, a hand is coming in holding what appears to be a sex toy or a laser gun or some implement, and it is never explained. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm showing it right now.
I'm watching. I'm looking at it right now. So don't you think don't you think those are the monstrous hands, and that's some, because they're not human hands. They're obviously hands of the monsters, and it looks like it's some kind of like implement, maybe where they were I don't know, like something to rend flesh or burn something or do. I don't know. That's the only thing that I got that was intimated from that. But you're right, it's weird and it's not explained at all.
Okay, so that really threw me and broke my uh immersion in the story. And then then they find this like crude village, a settlement, and it seems to be empty, and it looks almost like something that like beetles would make. Like it looks like it's dung piles, like hollowed out, and it looks very inhuman, like as settlements, right? Like an anthill or something.
Yeah,
and that's creepy. Like it says it's weird, it's inhuman. Like they're calling it out, but they're also calling out that it's clearly made by something intelligent. It's not just unthinking insect, brains. And then there's another panel that breaks this for me to where this page really bothered me. They see these paintings and they say the colors may be sick and pallid, but look what they portray. Faces unknown to even our imaginations. These tools, more of the same kind of tools Reed found in the forest. So they're looking at a cave painting, gleaning something about the missing inhabitants of this settlement they just found. I can't see what the fuck they're looking at. Can you? What is that thing on the rock?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's Cesar trying to draw something that is unexplainable, like a face that we've never seen before. We see a little bit of a body, and then the face is just insane. It looks like straight on. It looks like a crab on the profile. It might look like a cat with some whiskers. But I don't know. That was I had the same thing, but that was my interpretation of that.
Okay. So yeah, I had a hard time with that.
Yeah, no, it takes you out. That's for sure. It didn't work.
So every time I read this, that bummed me out. Like I love that thing with the weird space tool, whatever that is. It's gorgeous. I don't know what it means. And then the fact that they're all going, look at what we can glean about these things from this cave art. And I'm not seeing what they're seeing. Bugs the shit out. It's breaking a rule.
It does break a rule, but I think about every time that At the Mountains of Madness has tried to be done, graphic novel, comic-wise, anytime it's time to be illustrated, when they go into the city, so much of that book is them describing these reliefs that are done on the walls, and it's all shit that we have no reference for and that looks like nothing that's ever existed on Earth.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's hard. That's hard to do.
Yes, and we're going to, in a future chapter here, talk about the Nameless City in Antarctica. And it's an example of why At the Mountains of Madness doesn't work as a visual story, because the entire thrust of it is, this is an alien city. We can't even comprehend its architecture, its whatever. It has no frame of reference for human minds. And so when they draw it, in the future we'll talk about it, but like it breaks. And that's why this film has been in development for 30 years.
You can't do it. It cannot be filmed.
I claim it. I'm doing this for like the last 25 years. And
he knows. He knows he can't do it.
And if anyone can do it, it's him. But committing the unexplainable, indescribable nature of this alien city to a physical form ruins it. That it's impossible. It's like Blood Meridian.
Can't be done. It is like Blood Meridian, but even more. Like that's the thing, and that's what's so amazing about the novel, is that the creepiest, eeriest parts that just make your skin crawl are just two dudes describing what they see on a wall.
Yep.
And that's crazy. Like that's just the fact narratively that is the scariest part, and it is. It's just unbelievably scary. That book. It's maybe one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah, it's amazing, and there was a manga.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah,
there's a manga. We'll talk about that when we get to that.
We'll talk about that when we get to it. Yeah, let's finish this one up.
Reading Ground, I think, is that's the issue. Okay, we'll talk about when we get there, and we'll also talk about what the Shoggoths were in Lovecraft, which they were introduced in At the Mountains of Madness. We'll talk about what they look like the way he describes it, because we have a completely
none of this does.
No. Okay, so they find these strange cave paintings, these things that are otherworldly. They're trying to wrap their head around it, and then they see tied up cute little ElfQuest apes. I don't know. How do you describe these things, Jacob?
I do not understand. Yeah, it's so weird. So yeah, there are these strange little tied up apes. There's also, a lot of the humans. There's that double page spread where, the man is kind of like diving in. Like that whole double page spread is just amazing.
Oh, fucking A.
Like for me, the art has been like, oh, this is cool. And then I got to that part and I was just like, oh my God. It's just that the layout is so amazing. Every piece of that double page spread is amazing. The faces in the corner, there's women being torn apart and eaten in a really disturbing manner. It's amazing.
And that's a great story beat that happens, because on the previous page, we just kind of jump past it, but like they're realizing like these things have tied these things up. They're not in their home anymore. They might be in our home now. And they're like, oh, fuck, get back to our settlement. And so they start sprinting. Right. And this is what Jacob's describing, is this double page spread of them sprinting back towards home to their children and their wives and their whatever.
And being eaten.
Oh my God. The top half is them running, like you said, this beautiful, beautiful panel of them running and diving into a lake and swimming through a stream to get there as fast as you can. And then these abstract, panicked faces of them, they're internalizing, like visualizing what could happen to their loved ones at the moment. And then the bottom half of the spread is what's happening, and it's what they feared.
And it's the worst that could possibly happen. And it's horrifying looking.
So yeah. And the Shoggoths. We see them for the first time.
Yeah, you see them for the first time. God, I was trying to think of what I would compare these two monster-wise.
Want me to go?
Yeah, I want you to go.
My comment is, these look like the creature from the end of Big Trouble in Little China meets a blue meanie, meets a Chinese dragon, meets an orangutan.
That's pretty damn good, actually. I think that all four of those actually are a good combination of how they're depicted in this story.
But this scene we're seeing on the bottom two pages of this spread, these things. So just imagine if you can't imagine all those things put together, just think of a giant werewolf type of thing, but more savage. And they're just like one's just eating ass. One has a woman face down the ground, and he's just eating her ass, like not her asshole, her ass.
Her actual ass.
One just has like another one, like her head's just in his mouth. He's just chomping on him. It's like us with like in a Wingstop or something, or Buffalo Wings, It's like that. There's just eating these beautiful naked women.
It's brutal. It's one of the more brutal things I've seen in a comic.
It is pretty.
Is the sequence?
It's pretty upsetting. And then as if that's not enough, this like you get this one big vista on the left side, bottom left of that, and then the right you get to see the men like engaging in melee with these guys to try and stop this. And then it's almost like the previous thing we just described was like a David Lynch like flash, like where it's just like the flash photography goes off and you just get this like them drinking in, like, oh my God, they're eating our wives and children. And the next panel is like them diving in and fighting while the women are screaming, they're tearing my eyes out, and like they're suffering. Like now we're in motion. The tableau is in motion, and it's just screaming and writhing and gurgling and guts squashing around, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, it's super horrifying. And we should say that on a previous page also a child was lost. They couldn't find a child. So that's gonna come in, because after this 2-page spread, it's basically the last page, and everyone is dead. Everyone is eaten. It says, the last narration. It's just like we go to find the child. Remember the child, the one who was lost? He's been found by the apes and monkeys of the forest, who play innocently midst the rotting skulls of the decaying humans. And for the first time on this earth, man meets monkey. Are you now beginning to see something in this meeting? The origin of man has long been a question. It is says we come from monkeys, but at one point in history, there was a change in the monkey. He suddenly developed a mind that could reason. Perhaps now man need wonder over this mystery no more. So,
So the Shoggoths, we should probably we kind of need to say this now, I guess, before the At the Mountains of Madness reference story. In that story, they're the elder gods that flew here, created this nameless city, and they created this slave race called the Shoggoths that are these protoplasmic things that are undulating. They can take any shape. They're kind of like just big slime blobs. They have eyes that just like blip up and plop down. They're constantly shifting and just moving at all times. But they were a slave race that the elder gods made, the elder ones. And at some point over the millions of years of them living here on Earth, the elder ones of the Shoggoths started to develop self-awareness and will. And then they started rebelling against the elder ones. And then so there was like a war, like a race war. The elder ones, I think, like dove into like the sea and like retreated because they were being overtaken by the Shoggoths. But there's a hint from Lovecraft at the Mountains of Madness that the Shoggoths are the source of the thing that becomes the one-celled organism that we evolve from.
Yes.
Is the hint, the suggestion from Lovecraft. So the idea that we come from Shoggoths is Lovecraftian. And this is kind of taking like that and marrying it with the missing link concept of like, there's apes, and then something seems to happen, right? Like 2001: A Space Odyssey, whatever. Like something happens, and we make this kind of leap forward, a missing link. There's some jump, a mutation, where we become early man instead of ape.
Yeah.
And this is suggesting we just saw it.
Yeah. It's really something. Yeah. So this was a crazy intro into this.
Just to be clear, I mean, the last panel of the stuff that Jacob was reading was that child picking up one of its parents' skulls and throwing it to one of those ape things that has been freed from being bound to the trees. And so they're beginning to interact. There's a little pee-pee on this little kid. So apparently that thing grows up and mates with one of the females of those subhuman things. And that's where
right.
Early man comes from. So we're Uranians and ape things.
Yep. That is our ancestry. Yeah. Pretty disturbing. A pretty disturbing story. Maybe the most disturbing story out of all these, I think.
Yeah. I think this is the most disturbing one. The next one's
sure.
The next one's pretty disturbing too, but I think this one actually tops it just because of the orgy of violence. Was pretty disturbing.
Yeah, it's crazy violence. So yeah, you want to go on to the next one?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, and that's Nightmare 11. And this is from February of 1973. Same writing and art team. So this one I don't know. And it's a lot of 2-page spreads. Like for most of the whole thing, I think. Yeah. And there's a couple of these are all just like, yeah.
I'd make a note here, Jacob. If you originally downloaded this PDF when I first announced this, it was wrong. It was missing this chapter. So please go back to Patreon and upload it from the same link. The link has been corrected, but the file you've downloaded, if it was before like October 18th, is missing this chapter.
No, it's the chapter where the inhabitants of Earth.
Yeah, I originally uploaded a PDF that didn't have this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I corrected that. So it's in the same location on Drive, but if people download it before the 18th, they have the wrong one.
Gotcha. So they should re-download it now. Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Wow. So this one, I mean, this one was like, I love how it goes to like Outer Limits and Rod Serling space with this. And, I mean, yeah. So what did we say here? So this is like what you said. I think it's like 5 double-page spreads or something, or 4. It's a short story.
It's a short story, and it starts from the POV of a stranded astronaut with a great name, Mandrian Crawford.
Hey, that's Lieutenant Mandrian Crawford to you.
Lieutenant Mandrian Crawford finally, is not stranded, makes his way back to Earth, and he finds it all Planet of the Apesy, and everyone's gone, and everyone's dead. And, well, yeah, everyone's gone at this point. It says, where are the inhabitants of Earth? And so, the art style is, I don't know, it was a little different than the first one. I thought the art style was a little more crisp on this than it was on the first story. Yeah, so I think that, I think Cesar's finding his legs here.
So didn't it seem to you like, I mean, I was surprised that this story and the last one were both Cesar. Like,
me too.
It's almost like if the last one were film, it's almost like if you had like all the light coming in the iris, like it was almost like it's so idyllic, and it's just birds tweeting and trees and grass, and like it's just like very sunshiny and bright, and then this horrible thing happens, and it's like now he, like he's saying, he's dialed in. Now it's like hard lines and hard, because it's the future. So it's like it's not this like idyllic ancient past. Like now it's like spaceships and like the Statue of Liberty falling in on itself, and like New York being flooded. And
yeah, and he goes to the United Nations and everything's flooded, and he's flying around in his spacecraft trying to figure out, he goes to his parents' house. That's what he decides to do, and that's where he finds the Shoggoths there.
Can we just comment though, like on the first page, like when we first meet this dude, he's shirtless through this like whole thing. He's got like a cool belt buckle, almost like Black Widow's belt buckle, like a belt, like of like circles. And he's got tight pants and boots on, but he's reclining and he's reading the Necronomicon. And I love this note from Hewetson of like the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred's evil tome. This is the same Necronomicon you see in the Evil Dead, folks. If you're not familiar with this stuff, same type of thing. This forbidden tome of texts, of spells and knowledge we're not supposed to have. I love this note that like in this super future, it's like fucking Dune. This thing has persisted. This guy got stranded in space. His spaceship broke down. He was stuck on some other planet on a colony or something. He finds another ship that he can get working again. It has the Necronomicon in it. And so he's flying back home and he's reading the Necronomicon. That cracked me up. I love the persistence of evil.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great note. And that's the thing. Through these stories, Hewetson does a lot of really cool shit that you might not notice on the first read.
Yep, I appreciate
the second or third read,
more on the second read.
Oh, I did too, because I was just like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it. Like you kind of have to get it a little bit first. Second read is totally different and is really, really amazing.
So he has gone to his home, Arkham, which is a fictional city that Lovecraft created. It's a location for a lot of his stories. Much like Miskatonic University is a setting for a lot of his stories. If you've seen Reanimator or From Beyond, that's a university where the Necronomicon was held in the library under lock and key in a lot of his stories. So yeah, he's gone home, and then he sees a bunch of these Shoggoths. He's wandered around, like it's very much like a Twilight Zone story. Like, where is everyone? That whole type of thing. It's my hometown. Everything's exactly the same, but no one's here.
Yeah.
And then he wanders and then he sees a bunch of these things hunched over, ape wolf things feeding, and he freaks out and runs back to his spaceship, enters his spaceship. There's one has gotten on board. They start fighting. It slashes at him, and there's this cool little sequence. By the way, Jacob, when I first put this PDF together, the deprecated wrong one, I didn't realize this was all 2-page spreads. So I was reading it as single pages. So I was so confused the first time I read the story. It was so nice to go back and read it the right way, which is
it wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, it made no sense. The thing accidentally electrocutes itself and dies, and then he hears a scream, a female scream from outside. God damn.
Yeah, and he finds a pregnant woman who is named Francine, which made me laugh. But and she goes on to say that she says that it took 1 million Shoggoths to eat the entire population of the world. The entire population of the world was eaten, so they're just gone. They're not even there. They've been digested and shit out already.
Yep.
Yeah. So there really is no one there.
I was confused. In the bottom left of that spread where he meets Francine and she's telling him the story, she says she and her husband were caught in the webs of Shoggoths. That's not like suggesting they make webs like spiders, right? That's just saying like they were so spread out because they are intelligent that you couldn't get past them, right?
That's the way that I took it. But yeah, if they spun webs, that'd be cool too. I'd be fine with that. So yeah, they decide they're going to try and escape. They go to what do they call it? A moonship junkyard to find the parts to fix his moonship. And then they take off. She is in labor, and they deliver a baby on board. But like a Outer Limits or Twilight Zone, there's a twist at the end. It's a Shoggoth baby.
Yes, she did not share with him or us that she had been violated by her captors and impregnated. So just to also coolly reinforce the the beat at the surprise of the last story, these DNA are they work together.
Yep.
Disturbingly.
Yeah, really disturbingly. But yeah, so this infant's born and they just eject it out into space.
Puts it in the airlock and opens the airlock.
Puts it in the airlock. Yep. Yeah, it's pretty great. And then that's the last panel you see is this little Shoggoth baby.
And I love that he like makes a point of giving narration to explain like, it floats around out in space in the vacuum of space for a long time and eventually deteriorates and like, you know, he's like, don't worry. It does break up over eons.
Yeah, God, it's funny.
Bleak as fuck ending.
Yeah, seriously bleak ending. Oh my God.
So Earth is done. You know, this is like the ultimate sci-fi nightmare. Earth is overrun, done. They have a way to get out. They have one last hope like this. I mean, obviously not one last hope. If he can get over what just came out of her, they could start the human race again. But somewhere else if they go to another moon colony or whatever.
Yep.
But definitely bleak of like this, like, I don't want my child to be born on this charnel house of Shoggoth violence and gore. I want to be away from here and start again. And then it comes out and it's a Shoggoth. Like, it's just another punch in the face, right? It's all just 28 days later punch in the face stuff.
Yeah, it's brutal. These first two stories are really, really brutal. It gets kind of lighter and kind of silly at times after this. So, yeah,
and
it's
one thing we should mention, since this is a saga, and it really plays in the second half of the saga. Francie did tell Mandarin that the Shoggoths had retreated below the earth and were kind of waiting for a time. I believe it was atmospheric. This concept of waiting to come back is also Lovecraftian, like that Cthulhu is beneath, sleeping under the oceans, and when the stars align a certain way, he will rise again, and we're all dead. But this, he kind of softens that with like the idea, like these all things all go in like this, these hives under the ground throughout the earth, and are waiting for the moment to come back and conquer us all again. So that's introduced in this story. Just want to share that point.
Definitely. So yeah, we go on after that to Scream #1. It's from August of '73. Story's called The Archaic Breeding Ground. And this is by Hewetson and I guess Joseph Gual, I think would be the...
Which is his pen name. Yeah, I looked him up. So he's actually Jose Gual, but he signed things Josep Gual, which I don't know why. It's not more American sounding.
No, it's not. Yeah.
It sounds more German than Jose, but it still doesn't sound... Yeah, I didn't understand that pen name. That was a weird one. Yeah, so this one is the one that Jacob and I have been talking a little bit about, because this is where the saga kind of turns. We had like some table settings, like in the far distant past, in the far distant future, these things are persistent. And now this is the first one's contemporary. And it's also written very much like an H.P. Lovecraft story, that a narrator is saying, like, you're reading a narrator's journal and they're writing down the incredible things that happen to them in the experience and a warning. That's a very heavy trope in Lovecraft's writing.
Yeah, it's always a protagonist at the beginning finds a journal, and then that's just the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And, it's been used a million times after that in a lot of hackneyed ways, but, Lovecraft, it works every time that he does it. It's great.
Yeah. Yes, so we meet this guy who has... Another thing I love about this is where the story pivots and becomes meta. And everything... Lovecraft, his writings are part of this world now. So there's a metatextual construct in here where these people are actually going to Antarctica because they believe that what Lovecraft wrote in At the Mountains of Madness was not fiction for a pulp magazine. It was real. And they want to find the nameless city. Yeah,
they're retracing his steps. They're using the story as like a real journal.
Despite the fact that the novella ends with the narrator of At the Mountains of Madness trying to stop a second party from going to...
Yeah, that's all he wants to do is stop it. Yeah.
I love the irony there. I'm sure that's intentional, right?
It has to be, and it is really funny. Now, I guess about the art style, Jose Gal has a very different art style. It's much more what you would think, kind of a more elevated Curtis magazine style or Warren magazine style, to where it looks almost painted. It's has a lot of washes in it. Like this is what we think when we think, black and white horror magazine from the 70s.
Very Warren. That was my first thought too. So they are snowbound. So they arrive in Antarctica and then they're like locked into the ice, and so they're basically just stuck there, which is not uncommon when you're going to the poles. Apparently, I've read about lots of different ships this happened to, but not ones that were going to Lovecraft country. So this guy's writing this journal and he looks out the porthole and he sees one of our Shoggoths out there, and he's freaked out. And he was also reading the Necronomicon, which. By the way, if you are a Lovecraft person, you know that they don't just let you check this out of the library at Miskatonic. It's under lock and key, and you usually have to have like written permission to even look at it. And
but people just casually read it in this universe. That was the greatest thing about Mandrian Crawford, is he's just as casual, chill as can be. I think he's holding it with one hand.
He's probably
he reclines.
There's probably a snifter of brandy that was should have been his other hand. Like. Oh, what's in here? It's got Benson Hedges. What's this all about?
Oh God, yeah, it's great. So our mariner has nightmares. They get stuck in they land, and then they start retracing the steps. They're going to try and find the nameless city. And they basically do. They find it. Yeah. And it's kind of it's a bit of a retelling. It's a more retelling than the other chapters are.
Yeah.
Because this is basically just retelling at the Mountains of Madness. Now, you said, have you read the manga?
Yes.
Adaptation of this? What did you think of that?
I thought it was really cool.
I thought it was great.
I thought it was the best visualization of the story I've ever seen.
I don't think it's going to get any better than that. And I don't think that obviously is an accurate depiction of what Lovecraft wrote, because there can be no accurate depiction.
No.
Like all he describes, he describes a lot of it, but most of his descriptions are just like, there's no words on earth that can describe this.
Right. And so on page 19 of this story, when they find it, I find that it's a little underwhelming.
It is underwhelming.
It looks like any number of cities from anywhere that's not Europe. Like,
Yeah, I felt that, I think it's Tanabe was the artist that did the manga. And I thought, if you haven't checked that out, it's in 2 volumes and it is amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so good. And weirdly enough, I would recommend reading it on Hoopla or on your device. Because, I read it on my iPad and I was just like, oh, this is fucking badass. I'm able to zoom and everything. And I was like, oh, I'm getting the manga for the library. And I got the manga. It's manga sized.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Like I wanted that to be fucking artist edition. And it's as small of a comic as you can get.
Damn.
So I was just like, no, read the online, read it on Hoopla.
Okay. So I tried to check it out last weekend to reread it for this, and it wasn't on there anymore. So that license, whatever, might have expired from the
crap
digital borrowing.
Well, if you can buy it on Amazon or Kindle or whatever, like buy it digitally, because it's incredible.
So that was my main complaint about this. Like you were saying, like, obviously it's a retelling of At the Mountains of Madness because they're following Lovecraft's story to try and find the city in the story. So of course the beats are going to be a lot of the same, but just, this was not what I thought. I mean, I don't know.
No, it basically follows all of the beats of the story until the spaceship.
Yes. So, I was even like, when you see the city from a distance, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of odd architecture. So that's a little bit weird. When they go into the city, it looks like the Burgomeister is going to come and say Frankenstein's like loose. Like
I know.
It's very European.
Yeah, it's not great. He didn't. It's a hard assignment to understand.
It is. And one of Hewetson's main complaints about his job being the editor of Skywald magazines was that they did pick the Selecciones Ilustradas. And so he did almost all of his work with artists through phone and letter, which really frustrated him because he could talk to Pablo Marcos in New York City. He could go down to the city and talk to nothing to do something like Citron something, who was an American citizen but had a Spanish name. But most of the guys he worked with was through the phone, and it drove him nuts that he couldn't sit elbow to elbow with these guys and be like, no, more like this, more like that. You couldn't do that, right? You could now.
Yeah, there's a language barrier.
Yeah.
There's old timey, phone connections and
I didn't even think about the
mail.
language.
I mean, it's just it's crazy to even think. So yeah, that a lot of these stories work as well as they did is
a miracle.
I think it is a fucking miracle. And yeah, like I said before, Hewetson didn't make this deal. Herschel Waldman made this deal right before Hewetson took over for Saul Brodsky. So he was just, but this is the weird thing. That's why I think his era of Skywald works so well, because there are so many things that failed in order for it to get here.
Right.
Skywald didn't have any money because they blew all of their money on these color comics that they did first. They did the color comic first, and they just tanked. There's some, I have a bunch of them. There's the Heap. There's some romance ones. There's some Western ones. And,
I only know the Heap. I've never seen the other ones.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, they're expensive now.
I'm sure.
But, people didn't give two shits about them forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, most of them got thrown away, right?
Yeah, but they're square bound. They're all square bound.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, that's, but they're not great. They're just reprints. They're reprints or like a shitty A story and then a bunch of reprints.
Was the Heap reprints of old Heaps?
No, the Heap was new.
Okay, because I thought that was like one of the few, right?
It is the only one.
The thing that they kept trying, probably Waldman saying like, this is basically public domain. We can just keep doing this character, right? And that's what I pictured. Like, why do they keep like attached? I know that Swamp Thing and Man Thing were kind of getting popular in the early 70s, so they're probably like, we need to have a muck monster and no one's going to check the rights of us to use this character or something like that. But like they kept trying. Like even Hewetson was saying, like, they made me write the Heap, and I didn't connect with the character at all, but they just kept pushing it.
Yeah, it seems that Herschel and Israel, the Waldmans, they had a big heart on for the Heap. They just thought that was going to be the thing that made their mark until, Horror Mood took off and they realized that Al knew exactly what he was doing, and then it became something. But it is one of those that I think like when Al took over, there were so many things working against him, but somehow it made this weird, beautiful stew of all these really difficult things, no money, artists in another country that don't speak your language, like having to work with the Waldmans. It's like all this stuff, but somehow he made all this stuff beautiful. It's an immense feat that I still don't think people understand about.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. Who's to say that like if he had a limitless budget and got to pick every artist he wanted and blah blah, who's to say that would have been better? Maybe it's that weird Eno Bowie thing. Maybe it's just like use your non-dominant hand, close one eye, and like all that weird shit where it's like, oh my god, I did that by restricting myself and handicapping myself. Like
it is. This is publishing a comic line using a 4-track cassette recorder.
Yep. Totally.
And it's just like, nope, we have a very limited parameter of what we can do. So let's make what we have the best we can possibly do it. It's incredible. And yeah, it is. It's one of those things where, the most beautiful flower just grows out of this giant pile of shit.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So yeah. Yeah. But this story that we're talking about, at the Mountains of Madness, they basically, find a spaceship. And then, they realize that there's other aliens there for some reason that just look like aliens.
And like 50s sci-fi movie aliens.
Mating with the Shoggoths to have they're breeding. And then the Shoggoths eat the rest of this guy's crew, and we learn that the manuscript was found on the deck of an abandoned boat.
Publisher's note.
Publisher's note.
So I love the art in this one, despite not digging the models and designs for the Nameless City. I still like the art. Like you said, it's just that kind of classy, eerie, creepy, like elevated kind of art that I just it made up for some of the holes in the story and kind of the lack of invention and creativity in the story.
I would honestly say that I think this is the weakest story of the bunch.
So do I.
because it's trying to be something more, but I think that Al knew and pivots to the rest of these stories to just be like fun. He shows up in the stories. So
Yep. So the edibles started kicking in that towards the end of that last story with the aliens and the swapping babies and swapping whatever the hell's going on. It's a big old swap meet. So the aliens and the Shoggoths are like, I'll give you 2 human babies for one of them, sectors and whatever. Like, so yeah, whatever the hell's going on. The weirdest note was that there's beautiful women carrying babies in baskets on their heads, like they're in
baskets,
third world countries. Like, what the? I don't even know what that means. And they're going like beneath the ground, taking the babies underground to do. Is it to the deli? Is it to the breeding grounds? We don't know.
I don't know. I don't want to know.
To the stables for raising them as livestock. Something horrible, right? They probably raise them as livestock horrible. And use them as food, would be my thinking. Yeah,
probably.
So yeah. So we're gonna move on to the next story, and at this point, it is fully meta. They say don't write yourself into your story or whatever. Al said fuck that and dove in, included himself, his artist, the reader. Like from this point on, it gets like I feel like a little kid like listening to the radio, like Little Orphan Annie, and like the narrator talking like, "Okay, you're gonna save Annie, kids. It's your job." Think really hard, stuff like that. Like it's fun from this point on.
It's so much fun, and like you said, none of this should work. Nope. This should all be the stupidest shit ever.
Yep.
But I just got more and more excited once I realized that this was the direction it was going in. Oh fuck! I love it. So yeah, next one's from Nightmare, number 15 from October of '73, and yeah, like you were saying, it starts out with them going to see a professor that had written them. But it's like they got It's like they got fan mail at Skywald from this professor.
Yes. So this professor read what we have talked about and wrote them a letter saying, "Hey guys, I know those stories are really, really entertaining. We need to talk."
Yeah. Oh fuck! It's so good. And so, yeah, they go to see this guy, and he's just like, "Oh, I've come across some strange papers that maybe of great value to this." And yeah, it's just Al and Cesar there, just coming. They're just like, "Hey!" And then I love the opening page. I love so much. The title is called "This Grotesque Green Earth." It's just them sitting in like a little like classroom, and he has like little chalk drawings of Shoggoths behind him. And and I love Cesar is just like, "Oh, do you mind if I sketch away while you talk, Professor?" So he's drawing the scene that we're in, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, Al's lighting up a cigarette while the professor's standing up at his desk, and he's explaining that these papers were from this woman who lived in Arkham in the 19th century, and she lived in this house, and this is just cool because as a Lovecraft fan, like whenever you dive into like Arkham and like the geography, like all the street names, like if you're a huge Lovecraft fan, like these things are all recurring, streets, and like there's a defined geography. So it's like a very real fictional city to fans of the stuff. But she lives up by the Miskatonic River, and she she lived in this old house in 1869 by herself, and her husband was buried in the crypt in the backyard of their lot. And so she's writing this. We do the Lovecraft thing where you dive into the story. So now the story is from her perspective. She's this little old lady, and she goes into the crypt to visit her husband's grave. And she sees that there's clearly been a lot of movement and activity in this thing. Like it's a heavily trafficked area, and a crypt, like part of the coffin, like stone coffin lid, is moved, and she sees that it's actually stairs going down under the ground. And so she goes down there, and she finds some human remains. There's a gleaming skull. So someone's taken humans down here and fed, and she sees a light. She follows that. This art is just this absolutely gorgeous, expressive, like subterranean caves and darkness and fine line work. And she sees one of those weird, like insect-like cities under. So we're by the way, in fucking Hollow Earth land. So We're going to be in Hollow Earthland for the rest of the story as well.
That's
But
right.
there's a whole city of these things that she sees. She says, "Oh my lord, my god, my god." And she starts running away to go back home. And then she sees a side tunnel with a light. And she follows that in and she finds these fucking weird libraries. And there's a bunch of robed, hooded figures just sitting there still, just their hands moving as they write. And she realizes that they're zombies. They're reanimated corpses. And she's looking at them and she realizes they're writing man's doom. She's looking at the books and they're writing the future. Like this stuff, I love this weird shit. So they're writing about how the Shoggoths are going to come back and take over the world and basically creating the future by writing it.
Yeah, they're creating a future. They're also, and this happens in another story too, they're also like recording like, okay, here's the complete breakdown of man's vulnerability. That they're like, okay, these are man's fallible aspects. Like this is how to destroy man. And then this is how it's going to happen.
So yeah, she freaks out. She grabs that. She pulls a torch off the wall and sets the library on fire, and runs off. Even though they're already dead, so they're not screaming. They're just still sitting there writing while they're in flames as their books catch on fire. And then she runs into a Shoggoth and slips out of it. It's like freaking out, so she slips away from it, gets up into the crypt, locks the family crypt, puts a padlock on it. The Shoggoths are right on her tail. They start begging. Attacking. She grabs a shovel. She's fighting them. She takes a Shoggoth out. She's like this little old lady.
She's a badass.
And so, they drag her back into the tunnel, back into the hive, and there's smoke coming up because her fire's still burning, and it's all wet and dank and dark in there. Like the language is so cool about this thing. And what happens next? Getting what the next beat is. Is that the end?
Well, the next beat is that she goes down there. And there's so many Shoggoths and zombie librarians still running around that her captor gets knocked down by another Shoggoth. And then she escapes. And then she comes up and she's writing. This is where we find her writing the manuscript.
Okay.
And the professor's like, well, there you go, gentlemen. The narrative ends. He's like, oh, it's pretty crazy. And then they're just like, well, where were the papers found? They're like, well, let's go and find it. And so they find the crypt and the tunnel, and they go down there and find the woman. They find her skeleton, and it's to where the and this is the continuation of her manuscript. And then so no, it's not her. Is it one of the zombie librarians or is it her?
Oh, I thought that was her. I thought that I
thought that was her too.
I thought she became one of those things. So as her
Okay,
will is slipping away
yeah.
and she's becoming a zombie scribe, she's the last of her is writing a warning or something.
Yeah, and the warning that is on the piece of paper says, prepare. The year that they will come up to the earth is 1973 for the sake of humanity. So she's written the prophecy that's coming true because it's in this now modern reality. It is October of 1973.
Yep. Dark times.
Yeah, so I know I loved that one. The story's a little slight but cool, but I just love that. Yeah, it became completely meta. They're just characters. They don't give a shit. This is just how they're going to tell their story. And yeah, second time through reading this, I was just cheering for them because it just gets fucking hilarious. So the next one is
hold on. I just want to say, and Cesar's art is next level on this one. All the weird canted, when she's escaping and the hitting the shovel, all the panels are shifted in these weird Dutch angles, and the Shoggoths break all the panel lines, stuff like that. He's just having a blast with this. It looks like to me.
No, he levels 10 levels up each chapter of this.
Yeah,
he's almost like a different artist every chapter.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's so cool. And we get a new artist next issue, however. So yeah, we're in Nightmare number 19 from June of 74. And so it's a story called The Vault, and it's written by Howie Anderson, who's Al Hewetson. And the artist for this chapter is Cardona, but is actually Jose Maria Cardona, also a Spanish artist, of course, that worked for Selección Ilustradas, and also same thing, first credit in the States.
What do you think of his art?
I thought his art was great.
I get too.
I loved
it. Was a big shift for me from Cesar. But yeah, this also felt like very worthy of eerie or creepy.
Definitely, this is a little more. Yeah, it's a little more. Yeah, Warren or
Grounded.
creepier. Yeah, yeah, definitely more grounded in what you would think a black and white horror magazine is.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one they go to Scotland, and
Because he's Scottish Canadian.
He's Scottish Canadian. I mean, he lived in Scotland, I think, until he was like in middle school or something. Like so. Yeah, so he's back there. They're back in County Kilmarnock. 350 years of my ancestors. So we're at his ancestors' vault.
Yep.
So he's just like, not only am I in here, my entire ancestry, we're bringing them into the story. That's and I would just have to believe, like, I hope this is actually there. I mean, maybe he was kind of like starting to, the Wellick grave sites. I really thought that this was there.
Did you ever, but did you ever see that documentary Sherman's March, where the guy is like, it's like in the mid 80s, and the premise was to make this historical documentary about Sherman's March, but this guy, like, while he's there, like, he is at his college town, and he's like, I was dating this girl Susie, and it never worked out. I never understood why we broke up, and then he goes and, like, visits her, and they like, it gets in the film, like, he's like, why did we not work out? I don't understand what was wrong with our relationship. He's like, well, she's like, blah, blah, you never, you had mom issues or whatever. And then he's like, well, Lauren told me that. She's actually in the next town over. And then the film just becomes him, like, exploring why his relationships with women don't work. It just mutates.
That's amazing.
This is what that's like. I love it. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's super weird. So yeah, he goes to the what the Wellick grave sites. They meet a guy on the train up there, and he tells them that it was a burial ground for centuries. There's legends in the counties, and there's legends about the Shoggoths, and he said that they're things any wise man would want to know little about. And so he's talking that they were there centuries ago, destroying and killing these villagers, and then the villagers went back to their homes, and that place wasn't visited or settled ever again. And then the graves were there, and then became the Wellick grave site. Al Hewetson's ancestors are there now. And so he realizes, like, oh, I just have to go back to my vault, my family vault, and then we can go and see if this story's true. And so, yeah, they go back and they talk to one of the caretaker or gravedigger. They're just like, where are the Shoggoth graves? And he's like, what? Oh, no, yeah, you don't know about that. And he's like, oh, but we're kind of standing on it. He's like, well, the Weans, they tell about an old women's tale that there were the things that as big as houses and strong as bulls, and you don't believe in that, do ya? And then they're like, believe no. And I love in the next panel, they're just like, well, what are we gonna do? And he says, we'll come back at night with shovels. And so they go and they're just like, well, we're gonna start digging up. We're gonna dig these things up. That's our plan.
Yeah, interesting note. Just another beat about these Shoggoths is, like, as that guy's telling him on the train, like, they were burying their dead. So, like, as savage as we saw them in, like, that first story, the Forest of Skulls, where it was, like, eating people like their Tootsie Rolls, they also bury their dead. They have a inherent humanity or something that connects us to them in a weird way. So that was a cool note.
It is.
Like, to not just have them be savage, mindless things. They're intelligent, even more intelligent than we are, it suggested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'd suggested a few times in these chapters, which is which is great. But yeah, so they dig down, and boy, they find stuff.
Well, yeah, yeah. I love that they dig and they keep digging down, and then, like, daybreak comes, and they're like, well, I hope we don't get busted if we have to come back or whatever. Doesn't seem to be a problem. They return back and they see a Shoggoth for the first time, and they throughout this thing, we haven't said this, but they say Tekalili is the thing that they say, which comes from At the Mountains of Madness. Apparently that's something that the Elder Ones said, and the Shoggoths, like, aped it and copied it, and maybe even used it as a, like, mocking cry, as, like, a way to attack when they're attacking them, like, turn it against them or something. But that's not this whole thing. So I love that. And, like, if you read about this saga or anything online, people always in their, like, little essays or whatever with Tekalili. Like you just, you got to say it.
You got to say it.
So yeah, it's called other Shoggoths, and so they run into a vault and they lock themselves in. They've got shovels, and then Al realizes, oh, this is my vault. This is where my ancestors are. And he's like, well, you're going to be joining them sooner than you want, says Cesar, the artist of this story.
Yep.
Or no, this isn't Cesar. This is Cardona, right?
Cardona, yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things is in there, you get the classic like Abbott and Costello meet the mummy, where like the Shoggoths like creeping up behind them, and they're talking about waiting until morning and surviving. And then Cardona looks around and he's like, oh my God. This is one looming behind them. Screams Tekalili. They start beating it, and he has to use his great granddad, his corpse, his coffin, tips it over on top of him. God damn. And so there's that giant hole, and they go into the hole, and they got flashlights. I mean, this whole thing is like Kolchak on ayahuasca, right? It's just it's utterly bananas. So what do they find?
They find a giant city under Scotland. I like that, just like the under Scotland is all in bold and like in a bigger font. Just like another is at a place in Egypt, and now this place under Scotland, under its very ground, under modern society itself, and they find another one of the cities.
Yep.
And so I love that they're just like, okay, well, first time we have evidence of their existence, but how do we get it out? And then it says, right as they say that, the Shoggoths come at them, and they don't stay and fight. They're just like, and we ran like hell for the exit. So they just run out of there. And then they're outside, and Al's saying like, oh, this has to be the saddest epilogue to a story ever. You want to tell the readers all about it? He's like, all right, well, let me tell you what it is. And so what happens, this is maybe my favorite part of this entire thing, is that they go back with dynamite and guns. They laid 8,000 pounds of dynamite throughout the entire city. So they become like superhuman. I don't know. They're the Phantom. They're it's so great. And so they line the whole thing with dynamite. Well, it's empty. They go back and it is empty. And so they're just like, fuck it, let's destroy it. And I love it. I think it's Al's like, you see this plunger? It's a detonator for 8,000 pounds of dynamite spread about that hellhole city. And he says, well, either Al or I could press it and blow the city into hell, but just maybe one of you believe our story. Just maybe one of you readers will want to obliterate that wretched black pit. And then he goes down and they do it, or that there's a hand that comes out that's obviously one of us.
Yes, us.
And it's us. We have done the plunger and blown up the nameless city under Scotland.
It's so weird. Like that top of this page, like where he's like, yeah, I'll tell it if you'll draw it, Jose. Like,
yeah.
We've gone so meta now to where they're sitting and talking to us, talking about drawing the story, him writing the story we're reading at the moment while he has to draw it so we can see it. It's so
and
weird.
Then we end the story.
Yeah, and we end the story by blowing up the abandoned nest.
Oh man, this is when I was just like, okay, I really love this. Yeah, Cardona's art is also really, really amazing.
Yeah. So the first time through, this one was where I was kind of like, I think he's gone too far. Like, I think this is too much. But the second time through, I was like, this is a blast. And we'll see at the very end here that he even tied the audience even more into it with like making it like a club, essentially.
You get a little membership thing at the end. Oh, fuck, it's awesome.
Yeah. So we got one more. Well, it's two more chapters, but it's from one issue, right?
Yeah, it's from Nightmare number 20, August of 74. And so it has a prologue. And so the prologue is that, right, they're reading and they're just like, wow, people really like the story that we're in.
Is that Herschel? Because the artist comes in later. Is that him and Herschel that he's talking to?
It has to be Herschel. Yeah.
Weird.
Which it sounded like, from all those articles that's in that great magazine that you got us, and also stuff that I read from the Horror Mood, like Al doesn't have anything bad to say about Herschel or Israel, really. No. Like, he's just like, it was fine. And he talks about, he's like, Herschel was a great guy. He's like, we fought every day. But we always, we were never mad at each other. We just fought over stuff and tried to make things better. But yeah, Al had nothing but nice things to say about the Waldmans.
That's so cool.
It's great. And so,
The Crusade.
yeah, so they get it. That's right. They get a letter from a reader in Hannibal, Missouri. And he's saying, like, we formed a club. Every week we go out searching for Shoggoth tracks in the caves near Hannibal, searching for Shoggoths. So far, we found evidence that suggests they were here centuries ago. So they're just, again, reading fan mail. And people are like, I love your stuff. I found some here. And they're like, let's go. And so they're off.
Making a club. People have clubs now.
There's a club.
At least in this world.
Yep.
I would not be surprised if somebody in Hannibal wrote a letter in and said, we're looking for him. Like some 12-year-old kid or something.
Probably. Oh, God. It's so awesome. And, oh, yeah, the news, but I think it's Al, right? And Al is saying he went to the New York Public Library. And then, so that's Cardona that comes in then at the end. He's like, look at this. And I was like, good Lord. And then we see on the next page that, that's an article about weird beasts seen near Egyptian pyramids, which was mentioned in the story previous to this.
So that's another, Antarctica, Egypt, Scotland. Those are the nests, and so far that are known.
They're all connected, and just the Hollow Earth,
and the Hollow Earth, via the Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
So these guys have already figured it out. They know what's what, right? So they need to go to the public library and dig around the stacks, and they meet Mr. Elst, and they ask about material on the Shoggoths. He's like, do you know what I mean by Shoggoths? Like, indeed I do, gentlemen. Yes, to both questions. And then there's a photo of a real woman that looks like the girl in the panel we just saw. So they have now gone into multimedia. Like he's so intent on making this meta real narrative that they're using actual people now to back it up and say, this is a person. This isn't just a librarian named Mr. Elst. She's a real person. Here's a picture of her.
I know, it's crazy.
And she's saying we have from the Miskatonic Library the Necronomicon. We have it.
Yeah.
Suzette Durelst.
Suzette Durelst. Yeah. Yeah, and they're kind of amazed. They're just like, "What? No way!" And she's not, kind of as reticent as a lot of other librarians are about it. She's like, I'll go get it for you." Yeah,
it's not even in the rare books room. It's just out in the
it's
periodicals.
Not. She's just like, "Oh yeah. No, I got the Dewey number. Let's go find it." And but she goes to get it and screams, and it's just like, "Oh, the Shoggoth came and took the Necronomicon and vanished into the wall."
I love how it's like like mass hysteria at this point. Like they're just everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's like communists.
Or it's or it's super Scooby-Doo, and a bookcase opens up and a Shoggoth comes out, grabs the Necronomicon and busts down to the Hollow Earth.
It gets very Scooby-Doo in this this final chapter here.
Yeah. Which it is. It sounds like I was joking, but that's exactly what they do.
Yep. Secret bookcase goes down into a tunnel, which goes down into the subway tunnels. And then they see a Shoggoth bolting into a side tunnel. So they follow it. They realize it didn't see them. So they're tracking it. They got flashlights. They're all, it looks like Scooby-Doo. They're all in silhouette walking down the stairs. They find one of those libraries, another library where the end of man is being written by zombie scribes.
Yeah.
And sure enough, another Shoggoth shows up and pops up behind them. But I love this, you're saying that we can't forget that they might look like big, stupid animals, but they're anything but. They're highly intellectual. They have an advanced society, probably more sophisticated than ours, and they've been here for millions of years longer than we have. And that's when, is it Cardona?
I think that's Cardona, yeah.
Yeah, gets attacked by a Shoggoth. And they kind of get goofier looking as they go along through these things. They kind of look more like dogs than the weird, scary things they were in the first Caesar version.
Yeah, it is. And, he one of the Shoggoths gets Suzette. And then, Al's left over. And, he's saying, reminding us their libraries in different places. And I like that Yeah, all the important psychological deficiencies of man are recorded here.
I love
so that when the time comes for their takeover, they will be prepared. So I'd love what that is. I would love just like the record of what shiny things and Cheetos we go after, you know?
Or, see, I thought it was also like fears like of Frankenstein's and Wolfman's and Medusa's.
Well, we know that that's at the heart of all primal fear of mankind. You're right. There's probably just full page illustrations of, you know, Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman. Yep. That's it.
Tiny holes in things. Apparently, that's a phobia people have. So Al realizes what's going on, and he pulls a pistol out and just starts shooting. And I love that it just says, publisher's note, the following scenes cannot be considered accurate in any detail, as members of this investigating party were unconscious for several hours. However, we have reconstructed an educated guess at the events of the following few hours. So yeah, Al's just shooting his pistol wildly in this underground library, and then he gets knocked out, and they drag him off, and so we have to take this all with a grain of salt, Jacob.
I guess. So yeah, they're all dragged out of here. The page where they're dragged through the tunnels into the center of the earth are really beautiful.
Yeah.
Like I really liked every one of those. And then we get into chapter 2, the Scream and the Nightmare. And so, yeah, I think this is like that publisher's note. Like this is unreliable. We're getting into unreliable narrator territory.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're all tied up, which made me laugh. For some reason, and then they realize that there's a great, like, you know, full page illustration of them. We're in the center of the earth, and again, there's kind of like one of those, like a dung beetle kind of city, but a really, really cool illustration on that panel.
I love that, and I love like the details of like the, you know, all the heat because it's closer to the core of the earth, and like all the stone is like is like bleached from like all the just constant heat and like lava.
Oh man,
that page is great.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great page. The Shoggoths take them in a very like crude boat, which also made me laugh. But it's powered by something that we don't understand.
I love that. He gives so much text to describing how like it's like just a simple rudder, but it has some type of power we don't know, and so it's like a motorboat, but we don't understand it.
I know, it's so funny. He's just like, merely it's by its sense of design in relation to the waves. A mere touch of the rudder and the unpowered raft becomes a step beyond nuclear energy.
Oh my God.
The things that Al goes off on, I love. It's very unique to him.
Yeah.
And he has such he's very verbose. Like there's a ton of writing and narration and dialogue in every one of his stories. And they're all great.
This city at the bottom of this page is the most alien.
Yeah.
But even it's kind of got minarets and it's kind of Russian,
just like
Arabian kind of
like maybe it's Turkey.
Yeah,
maybe,
Turkish,
you know,
totally.
Like, yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, they're in shackles. They're being dragged by the Shoggoths, just glaring at them, and it's just kind of devolved into just a simple like creatures capturing the heroes. Get a cool vista. Gets very kind of expressionistic, like the art, like that, like them crossing that land bridge over in the city is kind of cool. And so they're all talking, and Al says, "I wonder what they're saying." And then Suzette says, "That one has a copy of your magazine." And so Cardona's like, "Wait, then we're as good as dead. For if they know about our crusade against them, we're sure to be number one of their death list."
But I love there's 3 Shoggoths like crowded around each other, like around like an issue of Nightmare. And you can tell they're all just like, oh, these guys are dead. Yeah, oh my God. So funny. And so they escape. They escape their bonds. And Suzette, again, is just like, we can't escape. It's the center of the earth. I don't even believe that, but it is. We're in the center of the earth. And then Al becomes, there's a few parts in these last 2 stories where Al becomes like the action hero.
Yeah.
Which just it just kills me. It's so
Kurt Russell's all of a sudden.
It is. It's so like endearing and cute and just like But he's doing all this shit that shouldn't work. All these things, all these narrative devices he's using, he should be cringy.
Yes.
But he just doesn't give a fuck and just throws it all out there in such an earnest way that you just go right along with him.
Because they're so endearing.
They're so endearing. And Cardona draws Al like looking towards us in that panel. He's like, we got to die down here wherever we are. We might as well get in a few licks of our own. And so they start fighting back. They like push a table onto the Shoggoths that are reading Nightmare.
Why is that the weirdest thing to me, that there's a table in this city? Like,
there's a table that looks like an IKEA table.
Yeah. I mean, I guess tables are like a platonic ideal. Like tables, like if you think of a table, it has a form. So yeah, I guess tables exist throughout all forms of life, but yeah, it looks like an IKEA table. I did love that when Al's looking at us, like, and treating us like, hey guys, if we're going down, we're going to take a few of these bastards out with us. Those washes in the background, Cardona's having a blast. Yeah, just gorgeous. He looks like Stan Lee.
He does look like Stan Lee.
He did work for a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was Stan's assistant. Yeah, and had also pretty good things. Yeah, he sent out no prizes.
And answered letters.
Oh, God. Really, really funny. He sounds like he loves Stan Lee, too. He's just like, Stan Lee's great. Even though Stan, Al really tried to write more. I think he only has 2 credits at Marvel. And he's just like, well, Stan was just like, yeah, you're not up to it, kid. I'm sorry. You're a good kid, but you're no writer.
It seems like from what I've read, maybe it was in that article of the magazine we shared, but like that at that point in his career, he was very Poe influenced to the point of where like he had a hard time not writing in that kind of like turn of the century weird fiction-y like affected style. And so Stan was just kind of like, if you're not doing a Chamber of Chill story, there's not a lot of use for you, and we don't need a whole lot of people doing that. Your style doesn't fit here. Was that the impression you got as well?
That was the impression, yeah, that I got. But that was that Stan
valued him. He saw something in him where he wanted him to be on the staff. He could tell he was an intern at first, and he found a position for him in Marvel. Yeah,
and Saul poached Al. Saul saw something in Al when Saul was at Marvel and Al was there. And he's like, oh yeah, there's this writer. He didn't do too much, but we need to bring him in. And so, I mean, Saul Brodsky brought Al to Skywald.
Yeah. Good fucking call.
Yeah, for real. No, just the series of events that happened to reach what we're talking about today. It's really cool. It's just one of those things that it's such a great story.
Why isn't Ken Burns telling it?
I know, right? No, I mean, and Skywald, I think a lot more people talked about it like in the mid 2000s, I think. I feel like not as much is talked about it anymore, but it's an amazing piece of comics history, and it's an incredible bunch of stories that are published.
Yeah, and another case of a bunch of really talented like artists and people who are expiring. So we had a chance to capture that story, I think, probably 25 years ago, and probably lost a lot of those stories.
Yeah. Al Hewetson himself died in 2004.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of those Spanish guys probably were about the same age and started kind of dying around that same time. So losing a lot of amazing stories.
Yeah.
Which losing history like that kills me.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So they have escaped and they run across that land bridge, an arch bridge. And, I love this whole sequence here. It's gorgeous. Like the use of negative space and like just having them like run across like a white detailless panel, and then an inset panel of the bridge, like the blacks and the whites and the negative spaces. This guy's a fucking genius in my opinion.
Yeah.
So they get across the land bridge. They're being chased by a bunch of Shoggoths, and they get like a stick and they start like prying away at flagstones. And somehow the whole bridge collapses because of that. So a bunch of Shoggoths fall down into that sea. And then you get to see them like kind of marching off in this weird badass pose again with just white background. And then they find a little natural tunnel, and they follow it up, and it's sloping up. And they go for, it seems like, I forgot how many miles it is. But they go up, 30 hours. They walked up and they see light, and they enter into a room, and it is a crypt. So they have walked somehow to Egypt.
To Egypt, that's right.
Where the Shoggoths were seen in the news story in the beginning of this story.
Yep, it's a crypt. There's a mummy.
At this point, I wanted to say this is stupid and this is dumb, but I was so in at this point. I was like,
too.
you could not fucking steer. You could take a wrong turn on this for me. I'm having a blast. Yes, let's have a fucking mummy now. And so they look at it says, well, those hieroglyphs on the wall. This is an Egyptian tomb. Well, there's a classic mummy on top of a sarcophagus right in front of them.
Hieroglyphs on the oh, fuck. It's so funny.
So yeah, it takes a minute for them to realize that this is the same tomb of Harmbah III that they read about in the paper. And they see there's a break in the wall and there's sunlight. And she's checking it out. Suzette's looking at it. She's like, wait a minute, this is kind of a really big mummy. And he's kind of oddly shaped.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, Al and Jose are like, man, this air feels good. He's like, yeah, I'm hungry.
I'm hungry.
Looking outside. And she's like, the shape? Come over and look at this thing. And then they realize, hey, wait a minute. That ain't no human mummy. That's a Shoggoth mummy as its eyes open up. The fresh air.
The fresh air reanimated it somehow. Well, but wasn't that the thing with like at the Mountains of Madness where they dug all those, all the creatures up and then they came back to life.
That's true.
Basically.
That's true. That's probably a reference to that, huh?
Yeah. So there is a little precedent there, but I love Cardona is the one that says this damn mummy is a Shoggoth.
That's like a network moment, right? That's like
it is.
I'm mad as hell.
Yeah, he's had to deal with this shit for too long, and so he's
He walked 30 miles, Jacob.
He did. He walked for 30 hours.
Or 30 hours uphill.
Yeah, uphill. So yeah, who knows how many miles that is? Then he says, yeah. So then, the mummy, the Shoggoth mummy, is about to go outside. Is trying to go outside, and then they're like, "What are we gonna do? These spears are good weapons. Let's go out with these." And so again, they're action heroes. They're up there and they're just like, oh yeah, here he goes. Let's go. And so they all the three of them, or Al and Cardona, basically just like stab this Shoggoth mummy to death. It's just unreal. And then again, those negative space, little non-panels of them stabbing the mummy are just fucking hilarious.
And don't they look like hieroglyphs? Like that depiction? Don't they almost look like petroglyphs or something?
Oh, you're right.
I think that's intentional.
I think it is too. That's
like it's
really
part
cool.
of the story, right? It's continuing. Yeah. This would be on the Nameless City walls too.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. Yeah, I love it. And then the sun melts the Shoggoth mummy into dust.
No proof.
No proof. Damn it! No proof. We've accomplished nothing, he says. And then, we're on the final page and they're just like, well, what about newspapers? They'll brand us nuts or publicity seekers. And it's like, well, we know where they are headquartered now. We can go down and find them. He's like, we can lead an expedition. It's like an expedition. We need people for an expedition, like a lot of people. And Al looks towards us as like, people. I know where we can get people. All right.
I'm part of the story.
I was just like, yes, that's me. I'm ready.
I love it.
Oh, fuck, it's so funny. And the publisher's note at the end is the sworn statement of Miss Suzette der Elst, librarian, and to convince you of our sincerity in the Shoggoth Crusade. She says, I, Suzette der Elst, hereby do swear that on the 18th day of July, 1973, I went to the center of the earth with Skywald artist Jose Maria Cardona and editor Al Hewetson. He says, I do swear that I've read this story before it was published, and every word and action alluded to me in this document is true. And she says, I cannot urge the reader enough to believe in and to join the Skywald Shoggoth Crusade. In the end, she's just like, in the end, she says the publishers hereby announce that at some future date, we will sponsor an expedition 'neath the earth. We ask for your pledge to join now. We will award a certificate, 8.5 by 11, of membership free of charge to readers joining in this crusade. No money, no dues. You risk no money, only your life. And there's a little like cutout thing at the bottom. Oh, fuck.
Every scan I found online is this source.
So there was something there.
Coupon.
So there was a coupon there. And at the bottom it says, I'm entitled to receive free of all charge my membership diploma, personally signed by the Archaic. Oh my God.
So sadly, I couldn't find any scans of what you received if you sent this in. And Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they fold like within 3 months of this being published? Wasn't like Nightmare like 21 or 22, like the last issue?
Yeah, they folded not too long after this. So
I don't know what the response was at the time. I feel like they had an impassioned readership, and that Stan, like we said in the beginning, killed them with Tales of the Zombie and Vampire Tales and Haunt of Horror. And
yeah, no, I mean, they did not want to go. Their sales would have been fine if Stan hadn't have totally tanked them in a brilliant way. Like Stan's just like, oh, I get to be Stan and flood the market with whatever's hot right now, and I get to destroy my enemy.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's bizarre.
Yeah, I just, I understand what he was doing and whatever, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just a pinko, but bums me out that he had to have all of the pie.
He did. He needed all of the pie.
Yeah. I mean, I will never bad talk Tales of the Zombie. What happened in there is absolutely amazing. But, I if I had to choose between those and this going on and maybe building reputation and lasting another 5 years, I might have chosen this.
Yeah. I don't know. We've read a lot of the Curtis magazines. There's some cool stuff. There's cool stuff in there.
There's some really unremarkable stuff in there too.
There's very unremarkable stuff. The Curtis magazines, they don't take the chances that Skywald did.
Mm-mm.
They look very normal compared to Skywald, but Skywald looks different because, I mean, no one used Spanish artists. And so the horror mood line had a completely unique look.
Yeah.
And had a completely unique voice because it was all fucking written by Al Hewetson.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It was way more interesting in retrospect than, the black and white Blade stories and shit. Like,
yeah, I mean, I've come around to Hewetson. He's for me up there with Kraft and like Gerber. Like he's up there getting like he was a weird dude in a good way.
He was a weird dude. Yeah, he was a great. He has a very unique voice and really cool guy. There was no one else like him, and so yeah, we gravitate towards those guys.
Yeah, so like we've been talking about it through this whole thing, but just that thing where this pivots to be again feeling like a kid in front of an old radio where you're trying to help Orphan Annie get out of an event, a scrape or something like that, and like
get your decoder ring,
ring out, and whatever. Like whatever he was doing there is dorky and should not work. And I loved every fucking word of it. I loved it.
I did too. I did too. I joined this club in a sec.
Yeah. So last year, a guy I forgot his name, something Gallagher, published basically. I don't know if this was based on something Hewetson wrote or what, but there's an anti-Shoggoth crusade graphic novel that was like an homage / continuation, particularly of the meta last couple things.
Really?
It came out last November, so it hasn't even been out a year. So considering how much we liked it, we should probably pick those up and review them.
I would love to. That would be amazing.
So that'll be something that our pack members and Star Gods and other folks will help make happen by supporting the show. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts that we're working below the surface throughout this, or I think we've been just pretty transparent.
Yeah, we haven't been holding anything back. Yeah, it just it started out really cool and brutal, and then really leaned into the Lovecraft mythos. And then became just the goofiest and most fun thing in comics. It has to be some of the more fun I've had reading comics in a long time.
Yeah.
It's fun, but just that it brings you in. It's so insane, and it should not work. It shouldn't work at all.
No.
We should cringe reading this stuff.
Yep.
I don't. I'm all in.
Yeah. I'm with you. It should be really stupid and dorky. Now, the first read through I did kind of think like this doesn't work. And then as it went on, I was like, this totally works. And then the second read through, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like Why can't I fill out the coupon? I want to frame the little certificate that's
I
signed
want the
by
certificate.
Archaic Al. Cool. Well, right. We loved it. So maybe at some point in season 7, we might go and do something else like the human gargoyles or another serial thing. I don't know. Who
That'd
knows?
be fun. I'd love to.
We always love to hear from you folks out there who listen. Did you enjoy this Skywald thing? Did you enjoy hearing some of the dive into the backstory that we did? I could talk about Skywald all day. I'd love to do more research.
Yeah.
I love the history of this thing. So if you want more, let us know. I'd be very interested in checking out. There's some not so great ones that sound even goofier. Like there's like a werewolf one and a mummy one, and at some point they kind of cross over, and like the two serials like interconnect and like have a crossover event like within Skywald.
Oh my god!
Considered pretty dumb by most people's standards, but could be fun. But
it could be fun. Now I don't know. I mean, even the dumb stuff could be super fun.
Yeah, now I know. I wonder if Al wrote it, but I'd also be interested in doing human gargoyles. I mean, that's definitely a less horror, more like humanity, and using like, from what I've read, like the human gargoyles is almost like stand-ins for like the immigrant experience. Like
you were saying at the
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's like you were saying at the beginning. It's probably the most famous story, sequential story that came out of Skywald. It's like you were saying. It's very highly regarded as a piece of art.
Yeah. So I would do that. I would do something dumb with Wolfmans and Mummies. Whatever would be cool. But
yeah, whatever. I'd be very curious to see what the pack members, Stargoths. Yeah, let us know. Tell us what you think we should do next.
Right on. Well, thank you for trusting me enough, Jacob, to go on a Shoggoth journey with me. Now that we're members of the anti-Shoggoth crusade.
Yeah, that's right.
The world's our oyster.
It is.
Until they take over the world and destroy everything.
Yeah. All was supposed to happen in 1973. So.
Well, it's like that Mayan calendar thing, right?
It's true.
Those are all fluid.
The wrong Bakhtun.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, folks, this was a way of us saying thank you for supporting us on the show at the Pack Member Star God level. This is going to be something that's just for you while we do this show. So we're not going to release this to the public. This is a special thank you. So you're kind of like anti-Shoggoth crusade member of B.A.M. We appreciate you for being B.A.M.
Yeah, it's always fun to do these things. I like doing things just for our core group of friends that like what we do. So yeah, this is always a privilege to do.
Right on. All right, folks. Thank you for your support, and thank you for checking this out. We love you. See you around.
Bye.